Welcome back to Hoops HD, everybody. And
Oh God.
yes, the
Is
Eagles
that
just won
Marquette's?
the big game. Congrats to my Philadelphia Eagles. I am still sober for some reason, and we're here for a bracket rundown show, I
I'm
think.
not.
You're here for football?
No, I'm just not sober.
Oh, okay. I thought you weren't here for the show. Uh,
Yeah. I'm
three of
usually
us
not sober.
staying up late after the Super Bowl, at least. Sorry, the big game, whatever you want to call it. But I'm your host, Chad Sherwood. That's David Griggs, John Tytel as well. And Griggs, why don't you tell everybody what we're going to be doing on this show?
Well, we're going to be building a seed list. Essentially, the selection committee, after weekly meetings and they keep in touch all throughout the season, multiple times each week, and then they meet and then they vote teams in and then they seed them, and it's a long and drawn out process over is it 4 days, 5 days, a week, whatever it is. We're going to do that in about 60 minutes or less. That's just how good we are. We're going to basically be seeding them as we select them. And I can't. Well, once you get the graphic on the screen, it'll make sense. We'll build it line by line, and then we'll bracket it. We're not going to bracket it until after we're done seeding it, but it's down there anyways.
Yes, here's what we're doing. It's on the screen right now. Sorry, it took me a second to get it up there on the screen. We're going to be three of us are going to build the seed list here. I'm going to go to each one of us in turn. We'll give a list. If the other two people disagree, we will make changes. If we do all agree, then we'll move on to the next line.
All right.
Um,
Yes, sounds
and
great.
we're gonna do it one seed line at a time here until we get all the way until this little box here that says at-large bids remaining becomes zero. We've got an entire at-large field. I'll fill in the 13 through 16 seeds. And like Greg said, bracket, you can read it down below, but you just ruined the show.
Yeah.
And this is as of after the completion of all games here on Sunday, February 9th. No more games going on right now that I know of. You know, uh,
No, why weren't there any basketball games tonight? It's
I
annoying.
don't
I
know.
had to watch reruns of the CBI from like 2018.
On that note, due to some other
Oh,
game I was watching and some other sport, I don't have a blind resume for us tonight. Sorry, maybe we'll do one tomorrow night with our Hoops HD reports. Let's get
yeah.
right into the bracket itself, though.
All right. Yeah.
Uh, Tytel, let me start things off with you. On the one line, who are the top four teams of the nation, especially after we saw both Auburn and Duke go down this weekend?
I think there's a lot of ordering and adjusting that can be made. But as far as the four best teams in the nation today, I think Auburn and Duke remain two of them, and I'll put them one and two. But I would certainly be able to hear arguments because, as you said, they both lost. I think the SEC has to be represented heavily up here, so I will roll with the Tide for the third spot. And well, I'd like to put in Vic Fangio for my fourth spot. I think I will go with the Tennessee Volunteers instead.
I kind of like the Vic Fangio pick too myself, but
Got a better defense than Rick Barnes, I'll tell you that.
uh, I, and Griggs, let me ask you: despite Auburn and Duke both losing, I was actually watching the Alabama game when they beat Arkansas, and the
Yeah.
announcers were, "Oh, Alabama's now the new number one team in the nation." I'm not certain that they were close enough to overcome Auburn and Duke with
Well,
both, despite that.
one of the things to just kind of clarify, Alabama probably will be ranked number one in the polls, but the polls are just that. It's a poll. It's people's opinion who vote. The most common or like one of the key factors in the polls is how recently your last loss was, and with both Auburn and Duke losing, chances are they will move Alabama up to one just because of how they are. But what the committee does and what we do is we weigh the entire season. What you do in November is on these team sheets. It all counts. A loss today does not negate what you did a month ago. And when you look at everything that Auburn has done, it's still more than anybody else. I still think that the committee would put them number one. Tytel must think so because he did it too. I would have I will say this. I would have Alabama ahead of Duke, but I've had Alabama ahead of Duke the whole for the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Well, let me start with this Alabama Auburn consideration first here, Tytel. When you look at this and you look at all the metrics, you look at even the records, record versus top two tiers, record versus top three tiers, road and neutral record. They also favor Auburn, don't they, over Bama?
I mean, count all the number one metrics on the right side of the screen, Chad. There's a lot of them. And the OAR, as you might like to see, is number one in the nation. So I think it has to be them. The good news, they play each other on February 15th. They play each other on March 8th. They might play in the SEC tourney. They might play in the title game. Like, if you're a fan of great teams facing each other, strap in because you're going to see them a lot.
But what about this second argument that Griggs made, which I might be kind of tempted to agree with him here, that maybe Alabama does belong number two overall over Duke, which can affect which region these teams go to. So it's important here on the top line.
It is. I think it's a coin flip. They each have exactly 3 tier 1 losses. They each have tons of tier 1 wins. They're both great against the board and the metrics and everything. If you're a strength of schedule person, you would have to lean to the Tide because their schedule is amazing. Their offense is amazing, but Duke's offense and defense are both amazing. Like, we could argue this one for 10 minutes. Coin flip.
Coin flip. All right. Well, I guess the rule tonight, though, is if two out of three of us agree, we make the move, Griggs, right? So I think we'll
We
do the
do.
flip.
Well,
Uh,
I thought we were just reverting to my seed list
uh,
whenever there was.
oh, our buzzer seems to be broken today.
That's so much more annoying than the buzzer. We can't have this.
Griggs, how about Tennessee at number four overall?
I agree with that as
Yeah.
well. And I know that they have, and I say this by one standards, the home loss to Kentucky and the road loss to Vanderbilt, even though it was a road loss, is not indicative of a one seed. But winning at Illinois and Louisville and Texas it, that is a very, very, very strong profile, and that is indicative of a one. And quite frankly, I don't know of anyone else, maybe one other team that has a profile that strong. I think they're clearly the number four overall.
Well, in that case, Griggs, why don't you tell me who the next four teams are? Who are the two seeds in order? Again, order really important on the top four seed lines because it does determine region and first round sites and all that.
Well, my top number two seed is a team I've been championing for the last several weeks. You'll all agree with me, and they had a big win at Auburn this weekend. That is the Florida Gators. I've
You,
just been on their bandwagon for.
yeah,
Don't
yeah.
play the song, please. Don't play the song.
Go ahead and give me three more teams before I do, Buzz. Yeah.
Okay, Houston, who again has a few holes in their profile, but not big ones, and I still really like them. This next team, it might seem unusually high to have them this high, but I just really, really like them, and they had a huge win over the weekend against another probable or possible protected seed, Texas A&M. And after that, it is. I was looking at three teams really closely for this next spot, but I ultimately landed on Iowa State. But I do realize there's Purdue and Texas Tech that are also strongly considered.
Tytel, what about that? Do you think he has it right with Florida, Houston, A&M, and Iowa State instead of a Texas Tech or a Purdue?
3 out of 4 ain't bad, Chad, but
I
I
agree.
would get Purdue in over Iowa State. Not that the Cyclones are anything to sneeze at. When you've beaten Marquette, when you've won at Texas Tech, when you've beaten Kansas, their resume is fantastic. Purdue won at the Ducks. They beat the Tide. They beat Ole Miss. They beat Michigan. And then as far as the injury bug, Iowa State's argument is that Milan Momcilovic was out for several of their losses. The A&M argument, they were missing Phelps and Taylor for several of theirs. So I could see how you want to put them together, but I won't veto if you think, because it's kind of a coin flip, but I think Purdue has the better resume.
Personally, I think Purdue not only belongs in the two line, I probably have them above, maybe towards the top of this two line. What Florida did this weekend with the win at Auburn, maybe that bumps Florida up to number five overall. But Griggs, this Purdue profile, like Tytel just said, look at all those tier one and tier two wins, which I think blows away Iowa State. Plus, you don't have a tier two loss at home.
Yeah, I in when you get into splitting the hairs, which you kind of have to do some of the time, a home win over Alabama is outstanding, even though it's at home. The win at Oregon is great. Iowa, Rutgers might not seem like great wins, but they're still away from home. The one thing, and again, just splitting hairs, the loss at Penn State, while it's while it's on the higher tier, I rate it about on par as a home loss to K-State, especially how K-State's been playing lately. And I absolutely love that win at Texas Tech that Iowa State has, but it's close. And I mean, if it were debate class, I could easily make an argument for either team. Like I said, I looked at those three teams for that last two spot really, really closely, and it
Well,
could be either one of the three.
I personally agree with Titel here that that Purdue definitely belongs on this line. Iowa State, the only best argument they have is the injury bug argument. But again, this is now a team that what didn't they lose three straight before they finally got that win this weekend?
They
That's
did,
kind of
and
rough to be a two seed and have lost three of your last four.
well, yeah, but
And
like one of those losses to Kansas State, you got to consider how good Kansas State is, and the reason Kansas State is good is look how badly they beat Iowa State.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go pull up my own three line here. I wouldn't even go with either Iowa State or Texas Tech next. I'm still going with Michigan State here.
Wow.
I still like what Sparty's doing. Um, I will then go with that Iowa State team that you just mentioned. I do think they come in here. Uh, I'm going to throw in Marquette and I'll throw in Kansas here. I'm not going to throw in Texas Tech quite yet because of the loss they're just coming off of. Although, you know,
It was a good one. And
it
it's
was
not like Kansas is also coming off of a loss.
but well, Titel, what do you think of my picks? Michigan State, Iowa State, Marquette, Kansas.
No veto as to the teams themselves. I might play around with the order in terms of Kansas is coming off a bad loss, obviously, to the in-state rival, but they had losses earlier in the season without some of their key players. They lost to Creighton without Ryland Griffin. They lost to Houston without KJ Adams. But as everybody likes to point out, they did lose the games. And even though they have some good wins like Sparty, like Duke, like Iowa State, um, I might put Kansas up a little higher, but no big veto. I like these four teams right here.
Um, Go ahead and pull up Kansas, Chad. Because while the overall profile is strong, the one thing that jumps out at me is no true road wins against anybody that we're probably going to select. And when you're looking at protected seeds, every protected seed that we select or that we place will probably have at least one against somebody that's in the field. They don't. And I think even without that, look at what Texas Tech has done. Holy crap.
Okay, well, first of all, when I look at Texas Tech, you want to talk about road wins against teams that are going to be in this field. They have one at Houston. It's a great win.
Yeah.
When I look at Kansas State, they have two neutral court wins against teams that are in above Kansas, in Duke and Michigan State. Last time I checked, you play the NCAA tournament on neutral courts, not on home courts. And I'll throw this little stat at you, Griggs. North Carolina State, who won the ACC tournament and made the Final Four last year. It's been over a year now since they won a road game.
I don't
Just in
remember
between
that.
there, they made the Final
Nope.
Four. So don't tell me that road wins are everything. I don't agree
I,
with you that they are.
I don't recall NC State in the final.
And where?
What in the Final Four?
North Carolina State. Why did you not
Yeah,
watch that?
I don't think that happened.
Okay.
No, don't play the song. Don't play the song. It's coming back to me now. Yes, they were there.
Sorry, Wolfpack fans. Griggs just discredited what you did last year.
Yeah.
Uh, Titel, do you agree with me then that Texas Tech does not belong on the three line right now?
I agree that if they had beaten my boys the other day,
Oh.
then they would. It's a harsh penalty for losing in Tucson, believe me, but I was going to have them in the four as a four, so I don't have no problem with you having it as a 4-2.
All right. Griggs, I don't think any changes have been approved by Titel, so I think we're sticking with my line. Let me go back to Titel for the four line.
Let's put in the Red Raiders since they look good, and even though even though they lost to Arizona, I'm going to have them ahead of Arizona. Unfortunately, I'm also going to have Wisconsin ahead of Arizona because Wisconsin already beat Arizona this year. And then we need another Wildcat team. So let's do my Arizona Wildcats at 15 and my non-Kentucky Wildcats at 16.
Arizona, Kentucky. Griggs, what do you think? Texas Tech, who I know you like getting in here at this
Yeah.
point, but what about Wisconsin, Arizona, and Kentucky for the other three teams?
Uh, I'm still nowhere near as big on Wisconsin. I don't. It's not that I don't have them on this line; it's that I have them a few lines lower. Arizona is okay. Kentucky, I didn't have quite this high, but I can kind of live with. Instead of whiskey, let's just start with them. A team that their resume doesn't top out quite as high, but because of a backloaded schedule. But now that they're getting into the backloaded portion of that schedule, they're continuing to win. And when I tell you who it is and you know how I feel about the coach, you'll know that it's not a homer pick, it's the Johnnies.
Titel, I
I
gotta say, I like the pick, and I get that they don't have the great wins other than Marquette at home, but 10 in a row, 12-1 in the Big East. Uh, Patino's comment was he was asked what would happen. Did you think that we would tell you were 12-1 in conference at this point? And he said, well, my response would have been, who the bleep did we lose to? But what do you think? Maybe the Johnnies belong up here.
They're really close. I have them as the top 5 seed, but because of that, I can certainly see the argument for making them a 4. And if you two guys like it, I will certainly not veto.
Okay, well, here's my issue with whiskey. There are a lot of top tier one wins. At the time they beat Arizona, like I think February Arizona would blow November Arizona off the court, and I think you kind of have to look at it like that. Ohio State, maybe we select them, and then it's a bunch of teams. While those aren't bad wins at all, they're not exactly as good as a lot of the other teams that we're selecting. I'm actually every time I look at whiskey, I like them a little more. I got to be honest, but I still don't like them as much as you will.
Let me throw this out there. I actually agree with you, Griggs. I think we should do the Wisconsin St. John swap, but I have one other team that I think is real close to this here. Uh,
Okay.
and Red Hot, what do you think about UCLA right now? Am
Wow.
I crazy to have them this close to the protected seeds?
I thought you all were going to yell at me when you said it when I had them on the six line. I no. Well, minus. It looks pretty. Yeah, yeah, maybe not.
Uh, Tytel, let me ask you: is UCLA close to this protected seed range? Maybe they're not. I'm not gonna win an argument that they're there yet. But are they? You know, one of the hotter teams in the nation, are they not?
Very.
Yes, 7 in a row is 7 in a row. I'm amazed that all their losses are tier 1. I could have sworn that when you lose at Jersey Chad's Arena in 2025, that should be a tier 2, but obviously the math is the math.
By three.
Yeah.
But by three, and with Rutgers lost today, that may drop to tier two come tomorrow morning. I'll admit that, albeit they lost to a good Maryland team. Um, but let's go ahead and make that switch. Here, what I'll do is I'll move Arizona and Kentucky both up a spot, and we'll drop the Johnnies in here. Maybe not.
Yeah.
Um, and what do we have to on the 5 line here, Griggs? That's going to be you. We will have both Wisconsin and UCLA under consideration at this point. Neither one
Yeah.
in yet, though.
Okay. And now you're kind of getting into an area. I mean, well, as you go down the list, there's more and more awards with each team and more arguments. But I had Ole Miss pretty high up here, largely because I like where it tops out. Kentucky has managed to win most of their hard games, but not win some of the easier wins. But I had them up here.
Yeah, but we actually put them on the 4 line. So
Okay, so Kentucky is all well. Like I said, Kentucky is. I just forgot to. Keeping track of this is kind of hard when you don't have any arms to, delete from your list here. Uh, they are a bit of a home court hero, and so that you can certainly shoot them down. But I'm still really big on Mizzou. Um, and then Illinois, who again is kind of schizophrenic. And while they lost 5 out of 7, and maybe because of that they should be a little lower than this, they did win over the weekend, and I had Mississippi State here.
okay, so you wouldn't have Wisconsin or UCLA in yet, then.
No, I had them. They are coming up. UCLA was next, and then I had Wisconsin to
Uh,
give you a peek down the bracket.
I'll tell you, I personally agree with 2 out of 4. Tytel, what do you think?
I agree with Ole Miss. I agree with Missouri. Illinois is very close, but I think Whiskey is better than Illinois, even though Illinois beat Whiskey earlier this season. So if you want to use the head to head, I get it. Mississippi State, I just think this is too early. They've got a lot of metrics that seem more like a 6 or 7. If you want to go UCLA, I certainly get it, but I think that Go Blue deserves a little consideration here because Dusty May has the train rolling right down the tracks.
I love the, it's kind of funny, Griggs. You championed Michigan so much earlier in the season of these shows. I was shocked you didn't have them up here because I'm with Tytel that Michigan is back up in this range at this point. Um,
Hmm.
Let me pull them up against. Let's start them up against that Mississippi State team, and then we'll take a look at the Wisconsin, Illinois. But Griggs, you love top road wins. Can you do better than having all 5 of your quad one wins being all on true road games?
That's pretty good. Um, I think I'm convinced. I was just making sure you all were paying attention.
Uh, okay, so if we do make the Michigan Mississippi State swap, then Griggs, what about the other idea here? Is that maybe Wisconsin belongs in over your pick here of Illinois?
Let me
Give me a
see.
second to pull them both up here.
Yeah, yeah. Let's get them both up there. Illinois did beat Wisconsin, and they won it. Or I think Illinois tops out a little heavier. Having said that, they bottom out a little lower with Northwestern and Rutgers and teams like Whiskey has not lost to anybody that's likely to not be in the top half of the bracket. It's close. They land pretty close to one another.
And what about that, Titel? Illinois does have 3 losses to teams we're not going to be putting in the field tonight, do they not?
Correct. And to the puppet's point, if it's close, then you should use head to head. So if you guys want to go with the Illini, I get it.
And head to head, but it was on Illinois' home
Yeah,
court,
it was at
a
Illinois.
close game on Illinois' home court. Uh, let's go with the aggregate in 2 weeks after they play again.
Okay.
Uh, but I'm with you, Titel. I think we drop Illinois and Mississippi State, replace them with Michigan and Wisconsin. Um, Michigan in, Wisconsin in, Illinois out, and who else did we just pop out there? Mississippi State,
I think so.
and that puts us on the 6th line, which is my line. I'm going to start this line off with that UCLA team that I mentioned earlier. Like I said, I think this is one of the hottest teams in the nation. I'm going to throw 3 other teams in here that we have not mentioned yet. Put Creighton in.
Red hot.
I'm going to put UConn in, and I'm going to put Maryland in, especially after their win today. Which means that I actually would not have Illinois or UCLA, Illinois or Mississippi State in yet. Obviously, I don't think you two will agree with me, but Tytel, what do you think about my picks?
I like Maryland. I like UCLA. I was going to do the Big East schools a little lower, but they're certainly at a minimum under consideration for a 6, and they're not bad picks. I just think Illinois' metrics compared to UConn's metrics, like Illinois is better than them in everything.
Griggs, do you agree with him that Illinois belongs in and UConn? I just pulled the trigger on it a little too early.
Yeah, I do. I think I think UConn's coming up maybe on the next line, but I don't have them quite this high. They have dealt with injuries. They are better when they're at full strength. I just think like, especially when you look at who Illinois has beaten. I just think they've done a little more. Illinois is a little schizophrenic. They're not the most consistent team, but more. I like them a little more than UConn. Um,
What about my other picks there of Creighton, UCLA, and Maryland?
I actually I actually like the Creighton pick and the UCLA pick. This is like 21 is exactly where I had UCLA, and I thought you all were going to like buzz the hell out of me because I figured I had them higher than anyone else. So I'm not going to argue there. In Maryland, while I was beating them up about 2 weeks ago, look at what they've done in the last 2 weeks. I mean, they've gone away from home and won. They have that win at Illinois, who we just put in. I just think that this is a team that's really playing well, and they look good. I mean, they look a lot better than while 2-5 in true road games isn't the best. I mean, they look a lot better now than they did in some of their early ons, like before they got their motors started. Their non-conference strength of schedule may not have prepared them for the initial start of Big Ten play.
Yeah, Titel, we've got them safely in now. If we're talking about the sixth line, if this team was sitting there on near the first four, they'd be in big trouble with that non-conference strength of schedule, would they not?
Yes, it's Georgetown-esque, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
Uh, that, that that is rough. They didn't even play Georgetown, which they should have. But
Yeah, I
Agreed.
mean, Maryland and Georgetown can't seem to find a strong non-conference opponent to play. Gee, if only there were an obvious solution to that problem.
okay, Titel, let me go back to you over on the seven line. We do have UConn and Mississippi
Take
State.
Maryland out for not playing Georgetown. No, 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 no. Okay, leave them there. Leave them there.
Titel, let me go to you for the seven line. We have
Okay.
UConn and Mississippi State under consideration.
We can plug them into the 7 line. I have no problem with that. I think that we need to get Memphis in here.
Yes,
Usually,
we do.
teams with several losses when you're in the American are not this high, but when you've beaten teams like Mizzou, Michigan State, and Ole Miss, as well as at Clemson, as well as UConn, this team is just too stacked. As far as a fourth, I think there's several in play. The Ducks have just been leaking so much oil. I don't think I can put them in here. So I think I would rather go with somebody like Louisville.
Like Louisville. Griggs, I think he went right conference, wrong team. What about the team that just beat Duke last night?
Yeah, I had Louisville and Clemson basically back to back. So,
Okay.
I definitely agree with. So I had Clemson just one ahead of Louisville, and again, their wins are a little bit better, even against some of the common opponents. They beat Duke, they beat Kentucky, so I kind of like Clemson a little bit more.
Yeah, I actually, that's kind of funny. I have them back to back on my seed list as well, with Clemson just ahead. Uh,
Yeah,
just because, and I get it, Louisville beat Clemson head to head, but Clemson beat Duke and Kentucky,
yeah.
and Louisville doesn't top out that high, and they both lost to Georgia Tech.
Hmm.
Um, but well, first of all, Griggs, what about his other three picks there in UConn, Memphis, and Louisville? I'm sorry,
I really,
UConn, Memphis, and Mississippi State, not
well, yeah,
Louisville.
Mississippi State actually had a little bit higher, and Memphis is one of those teams that you almost don't know what to do with them, and or at least I don't. And this is sort of where I always end up putting them in this like 20, in this 6, 7 seed range. Uh, the top of their profile is excellent. Michigan State out in Maui at Clemson. Uh, Ole Miss is turning out to be a pretty good road win or home win, as is Missouri. But the anchor there, I think that loss to Temple just torpedoes their resume. And without those two, we'd probably be talking protected seed if they hadn't lost that to the Temple and Arkansas State teams.
And Tata, let me go back to you on the Clemson Louisville debate. What are your thoughts on maybe giving Clemson, maybe it's a little recency bias, but the advantage over Louisville here, if I can spell
I like that you
name
call it a
correctly.
little recency bias.
A little recency bias.
I get it, but again, Louisville doing this with so many injured players, which I understand the committee does naturally not give one care about, but they are, and the fact that I'm not arguing with Duke and Kentucky. Those are fantastic wins. And so if you want to go Clemson, I get it. Again, I go back to if it's close, go head to head.
Okay, well,
Or
sorry,
put
but
in
I
Georgia
think
Tech.
but Griggs, you took Clemson over Louisville, right?
Yeah.
So 2 out of 3. We're sorry, Titel. I think Louisville better be on the 8 line here, which is Griggs's line to do, but I will put them back under consideration for the moment.
Yeah. And starting off the 8 line, if I leave somebody out, it's because I'm just not keeping track of this, but Louisville would be at the very top of it.
Which I agree with completely, honestly.
Yeah.
We didn't really bump them far, just
Right.
just one
And
seed line.
Oregon is again a hard team to place, and this is just where I always sort of end up putting them is in the 8 range. And then I've got their profile's a little weak, but I really like their team. I have Utah State all the way up here. And this was a team that I actually had higher prior to yesterday, I have St. Mary's up here.
Uh, well, I'll make my comment first, Griggs, because
Okay.
I think you cheated and looked at my seed list because you have my
Oh,
exact same 4 8 seeds. But Titel, so why don't you take a different opinion, if any, on these 4 teams?
They're all pretty great. I think I would argue that I might go with somebody like Baylor over Utah State. Not that I don't like Utah State; they're winning 90% of their games. But Baylor's beaten St. John's and Kansas, which are aging well. They've beaten Arkansas, which might age well. They've beaten Kansas State, which is aging well. Like if you do a dive into the resume, it's starting to look good. And when you take in the injury factor, they've had a lot of losses without Celestine Love and Edgecombe. So like when healthy, they are a top 8 seed.
I agree with that. I took a long time looking at this Baylor team because there is the injury factor. On the other hand, it's a team that's 4-7 away from home. It's a team that's only 9-8 against the top 3 tiers. Those are some of the factors I looked at and just saying that I hesitated. But then you look at the predictive metrics, and Griggs, the predictive metrics say that Titel is right, and maybe Baylor should be up here.
yeah. Um, the argument is there. It's just that like I personally tend to lean more than to it, actual merit than predictive metrics. I know that the committee heavily looks at both. The real committee probably has them in this range, in the 8-9 range. And it makes sense that they would. And Titel's got a very good point. They're going to evaluate. They're not going to just discount, but they will consider the games that they lost when they weren't at full strength, and they're probably going to seed them more accordingly to what they've done when they're at full strength. If they're at full strength going into the tournament. So
Uh,
that's a lot of words to say that, yeah, I understand the argument. It's a good argument. I would still have Utah State and St. Mary's ahead of them, but it makes sense.
well, I'll tell you what, I'm up next on the 9 line here, and I will put Baylor in here on the 9 line, at the top of the 9 line, so that they are in an 8-9 game one way or the other. Always changes their jersey color. My other 3 teams in this line, Oklahoma, they did a lot early in the season. I know they're not heading exactly in the right
Yeah,
direction. Uh, New Mexico, maybe a team that is heading in a good direction.
like them.
And because I just can't overlook their predictive metrics, I do have the Zags in here on the 9 line.
I had the
Um,
Zags at the top of the 10 line. Big discrepancy.
Titel, what do you think about Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Gonzaga then filling out this 9 line?
It's a pretty great 9 line shot. I wanted to argue West Virginia, but the X factor. Well, first of all, the reason I argue with them, they've beaten the Zags and Arizona. They've won on the road at Kansas. They've beaten Iowa State. A lot of great tier 1 wins there. Several losses. And the good news had been that most of the losses were without the coach's son, Tucker DeVries. They announced, I think, last week that he's done for the year. So now when the committee looks at them, it's not, oh, when healthy, they're great. It's like, oh, they're not going to be healthy, so they're not great. So I think that's why I would do a no veto with your line because of the injury factor.
Yeah, my understanding is the way the committees look at injuries is if the guy's not going to, they want to evaluate what your team is going to be in the opening round of the NCAA tournament. And if DeVries is not going to be
Yeah,
back, you're not going to get any extra credit for that. Um,
right. And
which is
it's
why you should
also,
never, you should always announce that he's going to be back by the first round. You should never say guys out for the season.
yeah, right. And the other thing that they do, and this is important to point out, is that when evaluating the teams that have beaten them, so when you're looking at Louisville and Pittsburgh, and they're going to look at how whether or not you were at full strength when a team beat them. Did that make sense? And weigh the wins that way. Yeah.
But Greg
So
Griggs, what do you think about my teams also? Any issues here?
there is a team that I like more than Gonzaga, and again, I want to see them side by side because if the predictive metrics are that out of whack, and there's no getting around this. It's a team that Gonzaga did beat on their floor, San Diego State. Um, but they do have. Oh my God, they've got a fantastic win against Houston, and I just think that they top out a lot higher than the Zags. But the Zags did beat them on their floor.
Not only did the Zags beat them on the floor, but Griggs, let's go recency bias again. They're just coming off a loss yesterday at Colorado State.
Yeah, and before that, I actually had them a little higher than this. So yeah, and it's hard. Like Colorado State only has, I think, one or two home losses. It's not the easiest place to go and win.
No place is easy to go and win, but if you want to
Of course.
be in the NCAA
Yeah.
tournament, as you like to say, Griggs, you got to win these road games.
Yeah,
Um,
you do.
what about that, Titel? Is there an argument that San Diego State should be over the Zags?
Argument, yes. Would I pick them? No. And it's their own damn fault in terms of if you dive in the stats, they didn't let Colorado State make a zillion threes.
Good
They
Lord.
didn't commit a ton of turnovers themselves, but 11 of 21 at the free throw line. That's not how to win a game.
The predictive metrics, Gonzaga has a slight edge.
And that's why I keep going back to on Gonzaga because
Oh,
I look at their wins and
oh
losses
my
and I say,
God.
this team's in the first four, but then I look at those predictors and I think the committee bumps them up a few lines.
Probably so.
Uh,
And the
Titel,
profile isn't terrible. I mean, they won at San Diego State.
let me put San Diego State under consideration along with West Virginia and go to Titel for 4-10 seeds.
I like the Mountaineers. I was actually going to do San Diego State as an 11, but I can live with them as a 10, so let's do that. I think the Buckeyes, just because they've beaten Kentucky, they won at Purdue, they beat Maryland, they beat Rutgers for God's sake. Like, let's get them in the field. And then for our fourth team, there's so many mediocre SEC teams to pick from here between Texas, Georgia, and Vandy. I don't know that any one of them stands out above the rest. So I will hook 'em horns for Texas.
Okay. Let me start. First of all, West Virginia, San Diego State. I like both those picks
Yeah,
here.
I like those picks
Um,
too.
Let me start with the Ohio State pick, though. Here's my problem with Ohio State, and this is the Rocco Miller problem, I'll call it. It's the 8-10 against the top 10 tiers, a losing record against in those meaningful games. 14-10 overall. You're at 10 losses already this point of the season, and you've still got 7 regular season games in a conference tournament to go.
Yeah.
I have a hard time putting Ohio State in this field. I would rather go with their conference mate, Nebraska, right now.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I know Nebraska beat them today, and I know what Rocco's like. I know I get Rocco's logic. Here's my response to that. Not all tier three teams are built the same. And when you lose to Auburn, who's a one, and Illinois, who's not protected seed but close, and Texas A&M, who is, and Whiskey, who I don't think is, but you all think are, and Maryland. I mean that's not the same as losing to teams in tier three that are hovering around the bubble. Those games are hard to win, and I think that like most of their losses, more than half of them, were games that most of the teams that in the 6 to 8 range would have lost them all the same too.
so you would have Ohio State in here as well, then,
I,
Griggs.
I yeah, maybe not. Yeah, I had them on the 10 line because
Okay.
they've been playing a lot better and Rocco's got a point and maybe they look at it, but I just think that you have to look at it a little more closely than they have this record against the top three tiers because look at how many of those teams were in the top half of tier one on the road.
Well, let me then go ahead and throw up Texas here as well. And I mean the word throw up because
Yes,
you
I'm not
got
a
the
fan
same
of that. Them,
problem.
I'm
You
not a
have
fan
this you have the 7-9 record again, another losing record, and maybe not the volume of tier one wins also here, Griggs. I also don't think Texas belongs in the field right now, but no, Titel is a lot better at predicting the committee than I am, so
Yeah.
I will concede that. But Griggs, what do you think about the Longhorns here?
I don't like them as much as Ohio State.
Okay. Well, how
Yeah.
about how about another team? Would you take Nebraska? Would you take somebody else above them?
Somebody
Maybe
else, and it's a hard
who
argument to make, but I
make
would
make
have the Drake Bulldogs. And if you go ahead and pull them up, you'll notice that they don't top out that high. A lot of that is circumstantial. They beat Vanderbilt on a neutral floor, and they beat Kansas State not on Kansas State's floor, but in Kansas City. They won at Bradley, who's really good at home. They've won 10 games away from home, which is a lot. You're really holding your nose with that loss at Illinois Chicago, but UIC can be tricky. I know that the paper isn't there, but I think the team is. I really like this Drake team.
Titel, what do you think about the idea of maybe belongs in here instead of the Longhorns?
They're a great team. I'm not going to agree with UIC can be tricky. That's the most hilarious thing I've heard all night. But they are a tier two. I'll give them that. But no, I just think that Drake's beating up on a lot of tier 3. And while they do have some tier 1, I'm more impressed by Texas's tier 1. And I think if Drake played a SEC schedule, they would have a worse record than Texas, but we don't know if that would really happen because they don't do that.
I unfortunately have to look ahead a little bit here on Texas too, and I know we're really not supposed to do that in this exercise, but I may only see one or two more wins the rest of the way here for Texas. I think that this is the team that drops out in the SEC. Uh, and I actually did agree with Griggs. I had Drake as the highest rated team that we have not put in yet on my personal board. So
Wow.
since we agree, I have to put Drake in over Texas because that's the way we're running this game here, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so we will drop. We'll put Nebraska under consideration. I didn't get the support to put them in. I did get the support. Well, Griggs said Drake, and I agree with him on it. So Griggs, I'm going to give you the 11 line. We do have Nebraska and Texas both
Okay.
back under consideration, and
Do you want
six
me to
at-large bids left. So you can put.
do you want me to
put four
give
teams
three or the whole line?
in. Give me four teams.
Okay. One of them is Nebraska. They've been coming on strong. They basically took a few weeks off in January, but they've been pretty good. Speaking of coming on strong, God, you're starting to hold your nose a lot with some of these teams, but I had Arkansas up here, and I realized that there's holes against them. Uh, Another team that's beaten a couple teams on the road that we've already, or one team anyway on the road that we've already put in. I had UC San Diego up here after the blowout win.
They would be our automatic bid winner out of the Big
Yeah,
West.
they
by
would
the way,
be
for
an
this
auto
purpose.
bid. And holding my nose again, Vanderbilt.
Titel, what do you think? I know, well, yeah. What do you think about all four of these teams who are all in above the Texas team that you liked on the higher on the line above? By the way,
Same argument with UCSD. They're great. They win most of their games. If they played an SEC schedule, I don't think they'd win a ton more games than Texas has.
do you like the other picks though of Nebraska, Arkansas, and Vanderbilt?
I like Nebraska. I like Vandy. I think that I would go with a different SEC team over Arkansas. I think I would go with Georgia, even though Arkansas has beaten Georgia and Michigan and at Kentucky and at Texas. So I get it. But I also think that we would have to put Chad's bandwagon of Wake Forest at least under consideration here, if not in.
Okay, I am. Well, look at that Georgia profile. It's awful. How
Yeah.
about the real Georgia profile?
There.
Let's start with that Georgia Arkansas thing because I'm with Titel on this, Griggs. I would go with Georgia before Arkansas right now. Among other things, we again have that losing record against the top three tiers. And I just think, and I think at the end of the day, these might end up being flipped, but I think where we stand right now, Georgia's still slightly ahead of Arkansas. Would have been nice if Arkansas could have found a way to win that come back and get that Bama win last night. But they did not.
Yeah, and it was sort of reminiscent of their season. They were way, way, way behind, so much so that you counted them out, and then they came charging back and got in it, but didn't quite get all the way there. Is that a microcosm of how their season is going to go? Like, are they
Pretty
going to
much.
get really close to the field and miss? But I don't like. I'm a little surprised you like Georgia more than them. 1-5 in true road games. I don't think their wins are as good as Arkansas's. Maybe their losses aren't as bad. Is that what it is, or is it?
The combination of the losses not being as bad, it's one less loss overall, and the
Yeah.
wins. Yes, at Kentucky was a great win for Arkansas. At Texas, I think Texas. I don't think Texas belongs in the field, and we haven't officially put them in yet. Still, uh, whereas Georgia beat St. John's, and don't tell me that St. John's was not playing as well back then. St. John's just
They
hadn't
were.
played
No,
anybody
no,
yet
they
back then.
absolutely were. Yeah.
And they did beat the same Kentucky team, albeit they
Yeah.
got it at home. And they beat an Oklahoma team that we already put in. And that Grand Canyon win is a solid win as well. And they beat Georgia Tech, and we have two teams in the field already that cannot beat Georgia Tech.
Okay. Don't if you're bringing up Georgia Tech, you're really, really stretching. Um, the one hang up for me is the one thing that always hangs me up. I won't even mention it. You know what it is.
Yeah, I know what it is, but at the end of the day here, there was Tytel and I did agree that Georgia belongs in here. I think we both like Nebraska and Vanderbilt in here. I'm going to go with you on UC San Diego over Texas. It doesn't really affect much because they'd be on the same seed line as an auto bid winner below the first four anyhow. Uh,
Yeah.
maybe it's the difference between 11 seed or a 12 seed for them, but uh, Tytel did mention Wake Forest also, so I'll throw them under consideration. And in fact, I'm up next
Are you
for
leaving
the.
Vanderbilt in? I thought that would be the team that you all didn't like.
Uh, I like Vanderbilt here.
Okay. Yeah.
Tytel, you want to defend Vanderbilt? Let's discuss it for a moment here. Look at that, 9-6 against the top three tiers
I
again.
don't like them, but it's just you got to take somebody. It's a 68 team tournament.
Has anybody else beaten Tennessee and Kentucky yet? That's pretty freaking good, no?
Florida has, or did they?
And are they in the field? Yes, they are.
Okay. Yeah.
You just made the case for Vanderbilt to be at the two line, Griggs.
Yeah.
Uh, it is my turn for the next three teams. As I mentioned, I am going to go with that Wake Forest team here. Not that they've done anything great, but they don't have the warts on the profile that everyone else we've been putting in is. And I'm going to put two other teams in here that we have not mentioned. I am not going Arkansas or Texas. I'll let you two vote them in for the last two at-large spots. I'm going with two teams that have very similar profiles to Wake Forest, and that they don't have much bad, but they really don't have much good. I'm going SMU.
Ooh.
I'm going to go with the San Francisco Dons for my
Oh
last
my
pick.
God. Oh, you have been drinking, haven't you?
Go ahead, Griggs. I'll pull those. What do you want to start? You want to start with my SMU pick?
Okay. Did you consider UC Irvine? I know they just lost badly.
They would have been my top team out, actually. So, yes, I did
Okay.
consider them heavily.
Did you consider Santa Clara, a
No.
team I think I like more than San Francisco?
No, not one, not for a second. They weren't even on my board.
But San Francisco was?
Let me pull up San Francisco. Tytel, am I
Okay.
crazy? That San Francisco with the I know they're lacking in road wins, but they don't have much bad. Am I crazy on putting them in?
They're in the neighborhood of crazy, Chad, but obviously beating St. Mary's in 2025 is an amazing win, and there's not any terrible losses, and tier two losses might end up becoming tier one, but I doubt it, but we'll see. They still have multiple opportunities against the Zags, so like I get it, but I don't think they're gonna make it.
right.
What about Santa Clara? Just look at them right next to San Francisco.
Go ahead. This is the first time I've ever had a show where I actually had somebody that I didn't even consider to be on my board that you
Okay.
brought up to be in the field, Greg. So I want to go ahead and make a case for this 9-loss West Coast Conference team with tier three losses, two of which were at home.
Well, you know, one was against Stanford. Well, you got to use your imagination here a little bit. They won at Gonzaga. They won at McNeese. Oh, come on. They won at Gonzaga and they won at McNeese. I just like where they top out. God, that loss to North Dakota State is stinging. Yeah, the three close. How close was? I guess Loyola. It wasn't close, but I mean, yeah, they stubbed their toes, perhaps even broke their toes. But I don't know.
Greg, let's go back to the board here because I don't think you're going to sell anybody on Santa Clara, but Wake. My
I'm just
picks were
saying that
were Wake, SMU, and San Francisco. Did you want to put Arkansas and Texas in front ahead of SMU and San Francisco?
Arkansas. Yeah, I did.
Tytel, do you want Arkansas in here also? Texas.
Definitely over San Fran. I almost put SMU into my fields today. Like really close. I went with BYU out of modicum of caution, but SMU is a nice little profile. BYU, I just think, has a Big 12 schedule as compared to an ACC schedule, but obviously they're going in the wrong direction. So
They're going in the wrong direction. Their out of conference strength of schedule was about 3 million, and they don't play on Sunday, and they're a pain in the ass to place. That's my case against them.
And yeah, Tytel, didn't we just make the argument that that lousy non-conference strength of schedule when you're in the first four might knock you out? That is honestly why they were my second team out, BYU.
which is why I'm not going to veto SMU if you guys want to do SMU.
Well, Griggs, what do you think? SMU, BYU, Texas. Those seem to be the three that are getting enough love here for our last team in.
Yeah, I had UC Irvine just one above Texas, but I
Okay,
think I
they're
know
not going to get the
we've
love to
already
get
had
there.
that discussion. So Texas, yeah.
You'd go Texas.
Hmm.
All right, so Texas gets that last spot over uh,
Yeah.
SMU, San Francisco, BYU, and UC Irvine,
Is this
making our
part? Oh, go ahead.
uh, where we just stuck three SEC teams in the first four. By the way, it is legal. It means two of
Oh,
them are going to play each other
yeah.
head to head in the first four. But you know, wow.
Um,
And did we just drop 14 SEC teams into this field?
Maybe I don't like Texas. Maybe I like UC Irvine, but
Well, tell, let me ask you that. 14, here we are, February 9th, and we just put 14 SEC teams in the NCAA tournament.
That seems like it's going to be too many only because there's going to be further cannibalization, my favorite SEC word this time of year. It helps when a team like South Carolina goes winless so that you can just give every other team in the conference a win over them. But like if the dregs of the SEC, like Arkansas, Texas, Vandy, keep getting some wins over the top of the SEC, it will happen. So it's possible.
And that's kind of why I think there's room for these teams with these bloated records, but not the great wins, to get in over these SEC teams. And I'm
oh
talking
yeah,
the SMU, the San Francisco, the Wake Forest, the UC
UC Irvine,
Irvines, those types of teams. I
yeah.
think that even a team that's, you know, kind of fell off my radar with a horrible loss, North Texas kind of half back on my radar again here. Um,
Is Boise State halfback on it?
Boise State was my third team out, Griggs.
Okay, yeah. I was going to say, is this the part where we talk about teams that we didn't select but that we looked at?
Yes, go ahead. How about
Okay.
Boise State?
I
Very interesting
just
profile now.
it is interesting, and I kind of, I don't want to say I quit paying attention to them, but I just quit valuing them, I suppose. But then you look at it here, and you're like, St. Mary's neutral, pretty good. UNLV on the road, pretty good. There isn't a whole lot of bad there, if you ignore the Boston College loss. Uh,
Every team gets one loss we just get to ignore. Is that the new rule?
no. I got another one for you, and they're
Okay.
not there yet. They may not get there, but you need to watch them, and that is Kansas State. They've now won five in a row, and they're beating tournament caliber teams in that stretch.
How about that,
They're not
Titel?
there yet. They're not there yet.
They're
I'm not
12 and
saying they're there
11.
yet.
They don't belong in the field tonight. But this might be one of the, in terms of who they've been, one of the hottest teams in the nation right now.
Yes, they could finish under 500 overall and still have like several tier one wins because of their schedule and frankly their play. I would go with the team they're going to face in a few weeks, UCF, only because they have already the other tier one wins like Kansas State does in terms of beating A&M, winning at Texas Tech. Unfortunately, tons of losses, although no tier three losses like the team on the right.
Yeah, and UCF on a four-game losing streak right now also, and that's a
Yeah.
something that really made me turn my nose when I looked at them. Um, I also had since I'm filling in the field here, I'm putting VCU in as our A10 champion, but I think it's almost a coin flip between them and George Mason right now. They both have very similar profiles,
Yeah, yeah,
and I
let's
think
pull both
they
of
both get a look here from from
Yeah,
the
and I was going to
committee.
say let's pull both of them up because I wanted to mention George Mason too. There
Mhm.
they are, not a whole lot. They don't top out that high. The win at Dayton is okay. The win at St. Bonaventure, a pretty good team at home. It's pretty close. It's just that like with VCU, I just can't get past that Seton Hall loss. Whereas Central Michigan, at least they're not Seton Hall.
Shit, they're close to Seton Hall, though. I gotta say, and that was back in November when Seton Hall was healthier, at least,
Yeah.
among other things.
But oh
Um,
my God, this conference is a dumpster fire.
Anyone else that you've considered, Titel? We've got a lot of teams under consideration there, but anyone else that you gave any consideration to being near the field at least?
I can argue for several Big Ten teams who are underwhelming. I would actually argue that Irvine belongs in over UCSD, and that if you go with the one, then maybe the other deserves consideration. But I
Right.
think that's pushing it only because they're starting to beat up. They are literally beating up on each other. So I think that the team that doesn't win the Big West is going to just have too much bad on its resume.
Well, uh, Taitel, I do have to ask you, they did implement, this is rarely done, but it is a rare transaction, but they did implement the Road Win Exchange program.
Love it.
to strengthen both the profiles. I mean, tactful, good move there.
Love it.
Yeah,
They both have such similar profiles, really. I mean,
yeah,
San Diego, the win at Utah State, better than anything that Irvine did, but Irvine has more meat in the tier two with the Northern Iowa and the
yeah.
Northridge wins and stuff like that. Um, but how about North Carolina after they got the win over Pitt? Are they still on your board?
They're on it. Oh, okay. Go.
Um, they belong under consideration. There's a gaping hole in tier one besides the UCLA win that was a good one, a neutral site. I wish they didn't have the 1 point Stanford loss because it's not a completely different profile if they do, but it's a much more interesting profile without that.
Anyone else, Griggs?
I think we've got it. We looked at San Francisco, SMU. Not really, and a lot of teams that are outside looking in that may have made runs at it. Xavier with a big loss today. Had they beaten Villanova, I don't think we would have selected them, but we would have certainly looked at them a lot more closely. Um, is there anybody that we're missing that other than K-State, who I know we talked about, that's
I,
playing like they don't have a tournament profile, but is playing like a tournament caliber team that might have enough time between now and the end to play their way in? And really, outside of Kansas State and Arkansas, I would say no.
I'll throw one over for our colleague Joby Fortson. After they beat San Diego State yesterday, does Colorado State have a chance to make that run? I don't think they're anywhere near it yet, but with that game at
Yeah.
Utah State coming up here this week, might become interesting if they get that one.
Yeah, and they are kind of on a roll. They talk about coming out of nowhere.
Mhm. Uh, all right. On that note here, I'm going to go ahead and finish up the 12 line with Yale and how about the hottest team in the nation now, the
Yeah,
Akron
Akron.
Zips, the longest winning streak in the nation. Congrats to the Zips there. Uh,
Yeah.
and real quick, 13 through 16 seeds are going to populate real quickly here. You can find out more about them on Wednesday night, our Under the Radar show. But we've got Samford, Arkansas State, McNeese, and Grand Canyon on the
Yeah.
13 line.
Rough weekend for the 13 line. We'll
All
talk
four of
about
them,
that
all
on
four of
Wednesday.
them suffered losses
Yeah,
this weekend,
right.
so they all stayed where they were.
Yeah.
Uh, Jacksonville State, High Point, Northern Colorado, and North Alabama on the 14 line. Cleveland State, Towson, Norfolk State, and Central Connecticut on the 15 line. Southern and Merrimack avoiding the first four, while Omaha, Little Rock, Bryant, and American are on their way to the first four in Dayton. But on that note, any other thoughts on what we did tonight or anything else that's going on here? Titel, final thoughts.
I certainly, the one that catches my eye from the 7-10 is if we get a UConn San Diego State game, only because I believe the Aztecs have lost to the Huskies each of the past 2 years.
Be the third year in a row. Yep.
Sure, they would love to see Dan Hurley yet again. And then as an Arizona fan, I love as much as possible to avoid Wisconsin. And I'm setting myself up for disaster in that 4-5 game if they end up playing each other again, which, just to confirm, Chad, even though they already played once in the regular season, I believe they're allowed to play again in March.
Yeah, the regular season rematch is just to be avoided in the first round, and and it's kind of a consideration for a second round matchup here, so it would be a mild consideration, but it is they would not move a team off a seed line, for example, to avoid that. So it's very possible it might happen when you look down that bracket down there.
Yeah.
Griggs, you want to finish off the show?
Yeah, some of the teams that are just really hard to place, Oregon, because they were so good early on, and I think they've lost five in a row now, and it's just kind of hard to know what to do with them because their ceiling and their floor are so far apart. There's a couple other ones like that, but they're the ones that kind of jump off. Illinois is like that a little bit. Kentucky, while they don't have anything really, really bad, it's when you look at a couple of the teams that they've beaten, you wonder how they lost to some of the teams that they lost to. Um, but this is again, it's a process by committee. This is similar, but not the same to what the real committee does. Although we do use the same points of emphasis. But one of the things, if you ever watch this show, or if you're ever on a mock committee, you're going to realize not everybody on the committee agrees with everything. So again, we had discrepancies here, but it's always fun doing this.
I'll get in with one other note here. Our colleague Rocco Miller from Bracketeer.org could not make the show tonight. He did send an email as we were recording this which says, please remember two teams tonight, one of which we put in the field, UC San Diego. The other, which I put in my field, you guys knocked out. He was with me with the San Francisco Dons.
Well, all the
Just
more
throwing it
reason
out
I'm
there.
with Santa Clara. I'm going Santa Clara.
Nobody's with Santa Clara right now. But
They
on
want
that
to concern.
note, I want to thank everyone for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow night with Monday night with a Hoops HG report, Wednesday with an Under the Radar, next Sunday night with another bracket rundown. But on behalf of John Titel, David Griggs, I'm Chad Sherwood. Thanks for joining us. Talk to you again real soon.